right, still on rebuilding communities, there's also the need to source new technology which can better determine fire risks in both rural and semi-rural settings. Now, the University of Wollongong hosts a place called the Centre for Environmental Risk Management of Bushfires. Now, thanks to the research done there by Dr. Owen, new technology is now emerging which will be able to precisely pinpoint where the most dangerous fuel loads are and what property and life is most at risk. I caught up with Dr. Price late this afternoon. You have done research on how to map where the fire risks are and where fires might travel to and how much danger that certain communities face, etc. Explain that research to us and how can that help us deal with this next time?
Okay, so me and some of my other colleagues have done quite a lot of research on how effective hazard reduction burning is, and basically what we find is, yes, it's got some benefits and it will help you reduce your risk, but you have to understand that because fuels reaccumulate quite quickly, it's only a temporary fix in any one place. So what we find is the most effective thing to do is to put those hazard reduction burns in the places that are most at highest risk, or else at the places where you're prepared to, where they give you an advantage in terms of suppression. So that's where you can actually stand and defend a place. So that tends to be against roads or near houses. So essentially what it's saying is, yes, hazard reduction is effective, but it's more effective if you put it in near the assets and less effective if you're putting it out in the middle of a national park or something like that.
What causes problems for that mapping process and the risk management of our national parks is the fact that in this summer already we've had 180 charges issued to people for arson offences, 180 already. It's hard to work out exactly where arsonists are going to ply their trade.
I think the problem of arson and how you reduce the number of arson ignitions is one of the biggest challenges we have. To some extent, if you could solve that problem, then much of this issue would go away. I mean, you can't stop lightning ignitions, obviously, but arson is a real problem, and the people who have done research into arson and arsonists and the people who are on the coalface trying to stop them, it's a real challenge.
Just in terms of the mapping research you have done, this would be ideally suitable for insurance companies to have hold of, but more importantly, what about the Rural Fire Service? Have they showed some interest in the work that you've done?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the Rural Fire Service have got their own teams who develop risk maps, and our role is more in developing new techniques that can be used to do that more accurately or perhaps quicker. It's quite a labour-intensive process, and so we're collaborating with the Rural Fire Service to sort of roll some of these new ideas out. We're sort of at the early stages of it, I guess.
So maybe,
but essentially, we're looking to a point where you can have a fine-scale map down to the street level of what the fuels are like and what the common fire paths are like, so that you can compare the risk at one house or one street to another street in another suburb, and so you get that nuance.
How would you physically be able to determine the fuel loads in various areas?
Well, it's a combination of methods to do it, but one of the most promising things is the use of LiDAR, which is an airborne laser beam that's fired down. It gives you returns or points where it hits a piece of vegetation, so you actually get a sort of a cloud of the vegetation, and that's at really, really fine scale. So you could actually map somebody's garden essentially and work out how much fuel is in the garden, and you turn those into maps across the whole of your region, and that gives you an idea of how much fuel is there. It's, again, as I say, it's sort of early days how you would turn that into something operational, but that's what the promise is.
But this might be the start of some incredible technology that may add to our knowledge of fuel loads and be able to help the RFS reduce firestorms.
Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the issues is that obviously the risk factors to a house, the biggest risk is what the flames are like or what the ember load is like right next to the house, and so we need to understand a little bit better where, how far away from the house is that danger zone, And data like this is really, really useful for that. And although these fires are a tragedy, the one bright spark maybe is that it does produce a great opportunity to learn with techniques like this.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. In terms of climate change, how much of an impact this summer do you think climate change is having on the fires that we've witnessed?
I'm sure every time you ask a scientist this, they give you one of these cagey responses. I think the thing is, because you can't ever say with a particular event, but what we do know is that on average we're 1 degree warmer than we were, say, 50 years ago. We know that we've broken many temperature records this year, and so it's almost certain that climate change has contributed to the depth of this drought. It's also almost certain that climate change has contributed to the high temperatures we've seen during those blow-up days. So without being able to put a percentage on it, maybe I could just say something like 20%.
So what we need to do is a lot more to prepare ourselves for the future seasons.
I think if there's one main story to come out of these fires is that we may be entering a new phase where these kinds of events are going to become more common. It's not going to happen every year because these things are periodic, but because of climate change, they're going to happen more often.
Okay, I appreciate...
So yes, increased preparedness would be useful.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.